Okay. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Forrest Crane, First Vice President of the Fairfax Resolve Chapter of the Virginia Sons of the American Revolution, and the Master of Ceremonies for today's commemoration. We gather here today to commemorate the 241st anniversary of Rains Crossing, one of the most significant events that occurred in Leesburg and more broadly in Loudoun County during the Revolutionary War. Brigadier General Mad Anthony Wayne and his army of 700 soldiers of the Pennsylvania line crossed the Potomac and marched through Leesburg in June of 1781. They were on their way to provide critical reinforcements necessary to push Cornwallis and the British Army into Yorktown that culminated in a great victory for the Continental Army. At the time of the Revolutionary War, Loudoun had the largest militia of any county in Virginia, 1,746 men, and therefore made a significant contribution to the war effort. The militia came from these same courthouse grounds to drill. The uniform of the militiaman was the hunting jacket, as you see represented in the statue, and also what I'm wearing and several other members of the color guard. General George Washington loved this uniform because the frontiersmen who wore them had a reputation of being excellent riflemen who struck fear in the hearts of the British regulars. Many of Loudoun's farmers did indeed join the famed Morgan's Rifles, an elite unit led by General Daniel Morgan of Virginia. I do thank you all for taking time out today and attending this. I will now call upon compatriot Larry McKinley to lead us in our invocation. Larry?
Thank you, Forrest. Almighty God, we give you our humble praise for the gift of the United States of America, for the vision of our patriot ancestors, and for your continued preservation of these gifts. As we commemorate Wayne's Crossing this June 4th, 2022, we are reminded that General Wayne's Crossing, 241 years ago, last week, was a significant event in Virginia and Loudoun County's history of the Revolutionary War. Let us never forget and always remember the crossing. Now, these words are on a marker close to the crossing at Noland's Ferry. 3 miles southeast at Noland's Ferry, Mad Anthony Wayne, on his way to join Lafayette, crossed the Potomac River May 31st, 1781. He passed through Leesburg June 3rd and joined Lafayette near the Rapidan River June 10th. The Pennsylvania troops that Anthony had and the Virginia riflemen that picked up in and around Leesburg worked together under General Wayne to give Lafayette great support as they drove Cornwallis back to Yorktown, and we know what that caused, and it was the end of the war. Father, please help us fulfill our role as guardians of our national heritage. Indeed, the only danger to our liberty is that we might not teach, communicate, and demonstrate to new generations of Americans a deeper love of country, a loyal respect for its Constitution, and a reverence for its flag and its institutions. Join with us as we endeavor to honor the dreams of our forefathers, ancestors who obtained our nation's independence. Amen.
Thank you, Larry. We will now have the colors presented. Our color guard commander today is compatriot Darren Schmidt. Color guard commander, advance the colors.
Color guard, march it, go. Here, colors. March time, march. Forward, march. Time. Halt. To the left. Pace. Present colors.
I now call upon compatriot John Thomas, Second Vice President of the Fairfax Resolve, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. John?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Raise colors.
Thank you, John. I now call upon compatriot John Reimer, Third Vice President of the Fairfax Resolves, to lead us in the SAR Pledge.
We, the
Descendants of the heroes of the Revolution, who by their sacrifices established the United States of America, reaffirm our faith in the principles of liberty and our constitutional republic, and solemnly pledge ourselves to defend them against every foe. Thank you, John. Color Guard Commander, post the colors.
Color guard. Post colors. To the left. Face. Forward. March.
A special thanks to the Color Guard and Commander Darren Smith. How about a round of applause for them? Thank you. I would like to recognize some of our special guests joining us today. Mayor Kelly Burke of the City of Leesburg and Town Hall. Mayor Kelly, thank you. Bruce Meyer, President, Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Lori Nesbitt, State Regent-elect, Virginia Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. Larry McKinley, past President, Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Jeff Thomas, past President, Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Jeff. Dr. Charla Rausch, Director, District 5, Virginia Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. And Wendy Frederick, Senior Society President, Children of the American Revolution. Wendy? I would now like to take this opportunity to invite several of our lineage societies who are bringing greetings today. Bruce Meyer, President, Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution.
Greetings, everybody. I'm Bruce, happy to bring greetings from the now 2,100 members and 30 chapters of the Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. It's wonderful to be here today to mark the commemoration of Mad Anthony Wayne's crossing in the Potomac. And I want to, just as a little bit of bragging, say that I'm very proud to say 34 members of our Color Guard were at different events, as well as non-Color Guard members throughout the state, Memorial Day, paying honors and respects to our fallen soldiers from all generations. So we're very happy to serve the state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and make sure that we keep our history alive and in the minds of our fellow citizens and compatriots. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Bruce. I now call upon Lori Nesbitt, State Regent-elect, Virginia Society, Daughters of the American Revolution. Lori?
Good morning. On behalf of State Regent Leanne Turbithill, I bring greetings from the nearly 10,000 Virginia Daughters of the American Revolution. We're delighted to help celebrate General Mad Anthony Wayne's marching his Pennsylvania line troops through Leesburg 241 years ago yesterday, providing the critical reinforcements that enabled the Patriots to defeat the British 4 months later at Yorktown, site of the last great battle of the Revolutionary War. And if you will pardon a commercial announcement, one of our chapters is sponsoring Yorktown Day this year on October 19th. So you all come on down. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I now invite Mayor Kelly Burke of Leesburg, Virginia, for her comments. Mayor?
Well, I want to welcome everybody for being here today. Leesburg is extremely excited that you always have this event here. And this started back in 2017. The town council did a proclamation, and it was followed by this wonderful event that we have here on the courthouse grounds. So the town is very, very honored that you're here and very delighted and proud to be able to say that we hold this event here every year. I, as the mayor, want to especially thank you very much for doing this. I have been here at every one of these that we have held. Last year we had a screen. If you remember, some people were on the screen and some people were talking, and it was a little chaotic, but it was most certainly a wonderful event. This is almost a hallowed ground here. The statue behind us is symbolic of what the families went through during the Revolutionary War. On my side of the family, we don't go back far enough. I'm only a third generation. But my husband's side of the family goes all the way back to the beginning of our nation. And so I just want to say that I'm very proud of all of you here today. I know that you're proud of your ancestors, and it most certainly is something that when I see the ladies with all their different pins, it's so amazing, all the research and all the efforts you put into recognizing your ancestors and the sacrifice they made. So thank you for doing that. I would like to read the proclamation that the town council passed, if you wouldn't mind. It is a little bit redundant in the history, but this says the proclamation is for Wayne's Crossing, whereas General George Washington ordered Brigadier General Anthony Wade and his brigade of Pennsylvania troops into Virginia in the spring of 1781 to reinforce Major General Lafayette's army during the Virginia campaign of the Revolutionary War. Whereas General Wayne crossed the Potomac River with his brigade of 700 troops on May 31st, 1781 at Noland's Landing in Loudoun County and marched through Leesburg on June 3rd, 1781. I mean, if you stop, you can almost hear their footprints as they're going down the street here. General Wayne's troops provided critical reinforcement for Lafayette's army in Virginia, which has been in retreat for the larger British army of General Cornwallis prior to his arrival. Whereas General Wayne's leading the advanced forces of Lafayette's army and augmented by 200 Virginia riflemen engaged Cornwallis at the Battle of Green Springs on July 6, 1781, in the largest infantry engagement to occur in Virginia during the war, resulting in the withdrawal of Cornwallis and his army across the James River into Yorktown, where the war ended in a few months later. Whereas Wayne's Crossing was a significant Revolutionary War event in Loudoun County's history, commemorated by historical marker at Luckett's Community Park, about 3 miles from where General Wayne crossed the Potomac. And whereas we recognize the sons of the American Revolution and the daughters of the American Revolution for commemorating this event, therefore proclaim that the mayor and the council of the town of Leesburg, Virginia, hereby recognize June 4th, 2022 as Wayne's Crossing Day in Leesburg, Virginia, proclaimed this 24th day of May, 2022. So thank you all very much for remembering your history. Thank you for honoring it, and thank you for being here in Leesburg.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for those great words. You have been a strong supporter to this event for a number of years, and we sincerely appreciate that and the enthusiasm that you and your staff has provided in enabling this to happen. We would like to pass to you a gift here that's a token of our appreciation. This is an American flag that was flown over Mount Vernon. It has a certificate on the back to that effect. Thank you very much, and it's a bit heavy, so I've asked John to sort of help you with this thing.
Oh, thank you.
So
That was
very
not
much.
necessary, but thank you very much. I most certainly will cherish it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now invite Jeff Thomas, past president of the Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution, for comments on the significance of the event we commemorate today, Wayne's Crossing. Jeff?
Thank you, Forrest. The Board of War wrote to Brigadier General Anthony Wayne on the 13th of May, 1781, "It is of the utmost necessity for you to march your detachment immediately and join Lafayette without loss of time. The junction of Lord Cornwallis by all events is alarming. If there is not a greater number of regular troops to oppose them than the Marquis has with him, the worst of consequences are to be apprehended. The Pennsylvania line commenced its march on the 26th of May, departing York, Pennsylvania on the first of a long series of marches to the interior of Virginia. General Wayne made the decision to cross the Potomac River at Noland's Ferry rather than further downstream due to warnings that Cornwallis and the British Army were headed to Alexandria. The soldiers covered the 80-mile trek to Noland's Ferry in 5 days, marching through warm, humid weather and drenching spring rains. They arrived at Noland's Ferry on May 31st with a full complement of troops, artillery, and baggage. During the Revolutionary War, Noland's Ferry served as an armaments depot in Loudoun County. In July of 1781, Colonel William Davies of the Continental Army wrote that at Noland's there are 920 muskets and 486 bayonets. There had been several mass crossings at Noland's Ferry during the war. The first was the transport of Hessian prisoners from the Battle of Trenton, and the largest was the transport of 4,300 prisoners from the Battle of Saratoga to the Albemarle Barracks in Charlottesville. Upon arrival, Wayne took immediate steps to gather boats as he made plans to cross the river that evening. Wayne encountered difficulties and dangers in the crossing. The river had become swollen and turbulent as a result of heavy rains, and the crossing was perilous. He ordered his troops to cross in what he described as 4 little boats. During the crossing, one of the 4 boats overturned and sank with the loss of a cannon, ammunition, and a number of men who drowned. Once across the river, Wayne and his army began the march south to Leesburg, arriving on June 3rd. Leesburg, as the only major town along the Carolina Road, was a commercial crossroads. As the county seat, the first courthouse was built at this location in 1761, 20 years before Wayne's arrival. A large militia unit mustered on these grounds, as you heard earlier. Leesburg had less than 500 residents, but a strong patriot leaning. It was through these crossroads that Wayne and his Continental Line marched. We know much of what happened on that march into Virginia because of the almost daily correspondence between General Wayne and Lafayette. Rain, warm weather, and high humidity made the forced marches tough going. In places, the heavy rains turned the roads into quagmires and the rivers into torrents. By the time the Pennsylvanians reached Lafayette's army on June 10th, the weary troops had marched 200 miles in just over 2 weeks. Major General Lafayette had arrived in Virginia in March with 1,200 troops to help defend against the British incursion. Virginia was in a state of distress when he arrived. In January, Benedict Arnold had captured the barely defended capital city of Richmond with 1,600 troops and burned it to the ground. In March, an additional 2,000 British reinforcements under Major General William Phillips arrived, and in April, Phillips took both Williamsburg and Petersburg. Lafayette arrived in time to stop Phillips' advance at Richmond, but by mid-May, Major General Cornwallis arrived, bringing his army out of the Carolinas. In command of 7,000 well-trained and battle-tested British regulars, Cornwallis set out in pursuit of Lafayette in late May. And on June 3rd, as General Anthony Wayne was marching through Leesburg, Cornwallis attempted to capture Governor Thomas Jefferson and the Virginia legislature at Charlottesville. Before the arrival of Wayne's Continental regulars, Lafayette had only 3,000 men under his command and was no match for Cornwallis. Clearly outnumbered, he retreated to Fredericksburg to await the arrival of Wayne. And following the arrival of Wayne's troops, Cornwallis turned his troops toward the coast by mid-June. With Lafayette in pursuit, Cornwallis made plans to make the difficult crossing of the James River. Lafayette seized the opening to attack the British rear guard on July the 6th at the Battle of Green Spring. Wayne's advance force of 800 to 900 troops began an extended skirmish with British pickets lasting nearly 2 hours. The British forces slowly retreated, suffering significant casualties, with Wayne's riflemen picking off several of the British officers. However, Wayne soon learned that he was about to face the entire British Army that had been lying in wait in the woods. Ebenezer Denny of the 7th Pennsylvania Regiment recalled, "Our advance drove to within 150 yards of the enemy. We saw the British light infantry distinctly advancing at arm's length distance and their second line in close order with shouldered musket. The main body of their army then filed out to our right and our left." As the entire British Army advanced out of the woods, Wayne reformed his line, ordered his artillery to fire, and then charged the overwhelming British forces with bayonets fixed. Wayne's audacious charge worked and probably saved his troops from destruction. It successfully halted the British advance to allow time for an orderly retreat. The bravery of this action was reminiscent of Wayne's bayonet charge at the Battle of Stony Point, New York, just 2 years earlier, in which he earned his moniker Mad Anthony, and in which he became one of only 7 men to be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal throughout the course of the war. In the aftermath of the largest infantry engagement to occur in Virginia during the war, Lafayette lauded Wayne and his forces. Wayne's Potomac crossing and reinforcement of Lafayette's army truly turned the tide of the war in Virginia. As Cornwallis fortified his position to await resupply, the siege of Yorktown began 2 months later, resulting in the surrender on October the 19th. Wayne's forces had truly been the tip of the spear leading to that outcome.
Thanks, Jeff, for recounting that very, very noble experience that our patriots went through. Compatriot Edward Spanis, president of the Sergeant Lawrence Everhart Chapter, Maryland Society of the Sons of the American Revolution, now will share with you a special project to commemorate the march of General Anthony Wayne. Ed?
Good morning. Good morning. So I want to describe a little bit about how Anthony Wayne got to Noland's Ferry, and then I will talk to you about the project that 2 chapters in Maryland have undertaken to commemorate Wayne's march through Maryland, and the suggestion also that the Virginia Society would do something similar here. As Jeff said, Jeff Thomas laid out a good deal of the context of Wayne's march from York, Pennsylvania to the Rapidan River in Virginia. As he said, he left on May 26th from York, Pennsylvania. On that day, he sent a letter to George Washington with the return of the detachment of infantry. And there was a report on the muster and who was there. And then he briefly mentioned, you said, you have the proceedings of 2 courts-martial held at this post, which I thought expedient to confirm. He said, a prompt and exemplary punishment has had a happy effect. I'll say more about this in a second. Harmony and discipline again pervades the lines. The troops have this morning commenced their march after being retarded for 4 days by a succession of extreme wet weather. And that was, of course, the story of the entire march. And then he said, I've submitted resignations of 4 officers of the Pennsylvania line This was related to the courts-martial. And then he included a duplicate of a letter from the Marquis de Lafayette about his affairs in the quarter, i.e. Virginia. But then he says that fortune lately seems out of temper with America, and we must endeavor to reclaim her, to force her to be kind. May she ever be propitious to your wishes, and may this campaign add new luster, if possible, to a character that will be held in grateful memory by every friend of the rights of mankind, obviously addressing George Washington. So he left with about 950 infantry troops and officers. The mutiny that he referred to was the second that Wayne had faced that year. The first was in January when they were quartered near Morristown. Enlistments were up, conditions were deplorable, soldiers weren't being paid. I mean, as you well know, the Army had no money. They were dependent upon the Continental Congress, which had no taxing power. It was up to the states. And Anthony Wayne actually described how he would go around knocking on doors trying to raise money and provisions for his troops. He was very committed to his troops and their welfare, but you needed resources to do that. So this is the conditions leading into that march. So they settled the first mutiny that took place in January, and as a result of which many of the men re-enlisted. But they were still very short on provisions. They were reduced to 5 regiments. 5 regiments have been disbanded. So they ended up with the remaining men and regiments. They had to recruit more in Pennsylvania before the march into Virginia. And as you heard, George Washington and the Board of War were pushing Wayne to get moving to reinforce Lafayette, particularly around Petersburg and Virginia, which were being threatened. And Lafayette had a much smaller force than did the British. As Cornwallis was nearing Petersburg and Richmond, Lafayette sent a plea to Anthony Wayne, saying, "Where this letter will meet you, I am not able to ascertain, but ardently wish it may be near this place where your presence is absolutely necessary." He told Washington on May 7th that the troops were beginning to move toward York, where they would converge, coming from Harrisburg, Easton, others from Carlisle, and Pennsylvania. So then he faced another mutiny of troops who were trying to rile the others up to desert and to revolt. And so Wayne was not somebody to trifle with this sort of thing. They held a court-martial in mid-May, a few days before they left. 20 soldiers were put on trial in the courts-martial. 6 were sentenced to death. 2 were pardoned. And 4 were executed in the presence of the troops. After that, that's what Wayne refers to when he says harmony and order have been restored among the troops here, among the infantry. So then after that, there were still 4, that was May 22nd. They were ready then to go. They still had 4 more days of horrendous thunderstorms and lightning and bad weather, so that they were not able to leave until Saturday, May 26th. They left at 8 in the morning, which was late for them. Usually the marches started somewhere between 3 and 5 in the morning to avoid the heat of the afternoon. They left at 8 o'clock, marched 12 miles. And where they marched, the road was called the Monocacy Road. This was a famous colonial road in which the Pennsylvania Germans who settled in western Maryland and some in the German settlement in Loudoun County, now known as Lovettsville, all came down the Monocacy Road, which ran from Hanover and York, Pennsylvania, down to Frederick, Maryland. So that was the road that they followed to Frederick. Saturday they marched another 12 miles. Sunday, May 28th, they were 4 miles from Maryland. They entered into Maryland, passed through Taneytown, and camped at Bruce's Mills on the Big Pipe Creek. Now, fortunately, that mill is still there. There's a community called Brucetown. So we know precisely where he crossed at that point. Then the next day, Tuesday, May 29th, they continued on the Monocacy Road until they crossed the Monocacy River. This is about 4 miles northeast of the town of Frederick. They ferried across the Monocacy River, and they camped on the west side of it. Now that also, the old road, the new road there, still follows the old road. So we're quite sure pretty precisely where that encampment took place as well. They stayed there an extra day. They had had a pretty grueling march because of the weather already. So they spent the next day, cleaning themselves, their clothing, and cleaning their washing and cleaning their weapons, and had a review. The troops were reviewed in the afternoon by General Wayne. Now the reason for that may have been is because on Thursday they left the camp at 5 in the morning. It was about 4 miles march into Frederick, and then they came down what's now Market Street in Frederick, and they went past the prison barracks in Frederick, which are now known as the Hessian barracks. But there were British officers from Saratoga who were there, and they were out watching him, and Wayne wanted them to see his troops marching past, and some say to remind them that Burgoyne's defeat at Saratoga was what brought the French into the war. So they went through Frederick and then picked up on what's called the Buckystown Pike, which used to be called the Carolina Road. So that's the Carolina Road that they followed then through Virginia. So they reached Noland's Ferry around 3 p.m. on the afternoon of the 31st, and you've heard the rest of the story already from Jeff Thomas. So what we are doing in 2 chapters in the Maryland Society, the Westminster Society in Carroll County was way ahead of my chapter, which is the Sergeant Lawrence Everhart chapter in Frederick, in mapping out the line of Wayne's march. And they are about at the point of being able to apply for a highway marker, which will be at Bruce's Mill there, which will mark the first encampment. We will then follow that up with a marker on the Monocacy Road, where that crosses the Monocacy River. It's a little place called Searsville or Searsville Mansion, and to get a highway marker there, marking his second encampment in Maryland. And we would suggest, we discussed in the Maryland 250 task force, there'd be a good thing if Virginia as well would take this up as a project and mark Wayne's line of march and encampments down at least to June 10th at the Rapidan River. And perhaps there's lots that could be done after that up to Yorktown. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed. That sounds like a great project that you guys are working on there. We now proceed to the wreath presentations. I call upon compatriot John Reimer to conduct the wreath presentations. John?
Thank you, Forrest. As I announce each presenter, I ask that you pay appropriate respects to the spirit of Loudon Revolutionary War Memorial behind me, then move to stand behind your respective wreaths. First, from the Sons of the American Revolution, Virginia Society, Bruce Meyer, Vassar President. Next, from the German Society, Dave Cook, past President, Fairfax Resolves. From the Fairfax Resolves chapter, William Forrest Crane, First Vice President. From the George Washington chapter, Richard Rankin, President. From the George Mason chapter, Fritz Barth, President. From the Norfolk chapter, Robert Bruce, President. From the Colonel James Wood, the second chapter, Dale Corey, past President. From the Culpeper Minuteman chapter, Charles Jameson, historian. From the Sergeant Major John Champe chapter, Ken Bonner, President. From the Sergeant Lawrence Everhart chapter, Carl Woodcock, past President. Presenting on behalf of himself and his family, Eugene Thomas, Chaplain, Virginia Society. From the Daughters of the American Revolution, Virginia DAR, Laurie Nesbitt, State Regent-elect. District 5, Virginia DAR, Dr. Charla Roush, Director. From the Catoctin chapter, Keisha Brown, Regent. From the Falls Church chapter, Susan Postle, Treasurer. From the Mary Hemmings Bell chapter, Ginger Stevens, Regent.
From the Stonebridge chapter, Katie Biscoff, Regent. From the Phyllis Wheatley chapter, Shannon Combs Bennett, Regent. From the Cameron Parish chapter, Holly Lynn Smith, member. From the Falls of the Rappahannock chapter, Sonia Johnson, Regent. From the Children of the American Revolution, Reverend John Marks chapter, Wendy Frederick, Senior Society President. Thank you to all organizations that presented wreaths today. We will pause briefly for any wreath presentations that we may have overlooked. If there are any chapters or organizations we missed, please come forward and make your presentation now. Thank you.
Pictures or it didn't happen?
Slow with the camera.
They're going to have to go over here.
Just because the camera's stuck.
Five, four, three, two, one. That's it.
Great. Sun is hot.
I had to recognize my early heritage.
That's great.
Thank you, John, for leading us through that wreath presentation. I now ask President Richard Ranking of the George Washington chapter will now lead us in the SAR recessional.
Until we meet again, let us remember our forefathers Until we meet again, let us remember our obligations to our forefathers who gave us our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, an independent Supreme Court, and a nation of free men.
Thank you, Richard. We will now take a moment of silence and respect as we retire the colors in place. Larry McKinley, Fairfax Resolve Chapter Chaplain, will now lead us in the benediction.
May the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit rest upon us and upon all the work done in His name. Please give us light to guide us, courage to support us, and especially love to unite us, so as not to divide us now and evermore. Amen.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you to everyone who participated in and attended today's commemoration, as we remember and honor the sacrifices of those who crossed the Potomac River and went on to contribute to a victory at Yorktown. I would especially like to thank Mayor Burke for her support and continued support over the years. Thank you, ma'am. I sure appreciate that. I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight an upcoming event. On the 23rd of July, I invite you to attend the commemoration, the 248th signing of the Fairfax Resolves at Pohick Church in Lorton, Virginia. We will also recognize 4 signatories of the Fairfax Resolve at that same ceremony. This concludes today's ceremony. I wish you all a safe and pleasant journey home and look forward to you joining us again next year. Thank you.